They tried to erase me from their home, their papers, their memories, but I'm still here. I didn't just survive their family, I survived losing myself, and I'll never let that happen again. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. She makes breakfast every day. The eggs are warm, but the family's eyes are cold. The sun had barely broken the horizon when Emily cracked the first egg. She worked quietly in the large suburban kitchen, every movement practiced. The sound of the whisk, the sizzle of butter, the smell of coffee, all part of her daily ritual. It was how she tried to belong. It was how she loved. Jason's mother, Margaret, walked in, already dressed. Not a smile. Not even a nod. She opened the fridge, retrieved the orange juice, and poured it as if Emily weren't there. Morning, Emily offered, hopeful. Margaret replied, without eye contact, taking her seat at the table where her husband, Richard, was already sipping his black coffee. Jason entered, still tying his tie. Smells good, he said, passing Emily by with a peck on the cheek. It felt routine, like brushing teeth. Not warm, not cold. Just there. Emily placed the plates on the table with care, scrambled eggs, toast, fruit, juice, and a side of silent judgment. She sat across from Margaret, beside Jason, trying to find a space for herself in the invisible geometry of the room. So, Emily began, I was thinking we could all go out for dinner this Friday? There's that new place downtown. We don't do dinners out, Margaret cut in, not looking up. Too noisy, and Richard's stomach can't handle that kind of food. Emily's words dried up mid-sentence. Jason stayed quiet, chewing. His fork scraped his plate louder than necessary. Right. I just thought it might be nice, Emily murmured, staring at her untouched toast. Nice for whom? Margaret muttered under her breath, too low for anyone to confirm, but just loud enough to hurt. No one said anything else. The room was filled with the clinks of forks and the occasional rustle of the newspaper. It felt like being underwater, everything muffled but heavy. After breakfast, Emily began clearing the table while the others moved on with their morning. She scrubbed the dishes harder than needed, her chest tight with something unnameable. She knew she was the outsider. She had always known. But she had hoped time would soften the edges, that kindness would be enough. That Jason would fight for her. He used to. Didn't he? That night, after the house was asleep, Emily padded down to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house looked different in the dark, a museum of cold heirlooms and distant memories. As she stood at the sink, she heard voices, quiet. Behind her. Margaret's voice. Low, whispering behind the closed den door. She was never meant for this family. Jason, he made a mistake. Emily froze. The glass trembled in her hand. When she walks in, the house becomes hers again. The car pulled into the driveway like it owned the place. Caroline stepped out, suitcase in hand, sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy sky. Her voice rang out as she opened the door, guess who's home? And the atmosphere inside shifted instantly. Margaret sprang from her armchair. My baby girl. Richard chuckled from the kitchen, you made good time. Jason stood and grinned. Look at you, city girl. Emily stood at the edge of the hallway, still holding a dish towel, her smile slow to form. She hadn't seen that much excitement in the house since, ever. Caroline swept in like a storm in high heels, confident, magnetic, commanding attention without asking for it. She gave her mother a long embrace, kissed her father's cheek, and playfully tousled Jason's hair. Then she turned to Emily. Emily, she said, offering a light, one-armed hug. Still making those healthy muffins? Emily laughed politely. I tried a new recipe. They're lemon poppy seed. Cute, Caroline said, already turning away. From that moment, the house began orbiting around her. Conversations drifted toward her stories, her firm in Jersey, her high-rise apartment, the art gallery opening she almost got invited to. Jason laughed more in 3 hours than he had in a week. Margaret doted. Richard listened. Emily faded. She noticed it in little things: Caroline taking over the Spotify playlist at dinner, Caroline choosing where they sat for movie night, even Caroline suggesting a new recipe Emily should try next time. She started noticing something else, too: how Jason changed around his sister. He was warmer, lighter, more willing to share. It was a version of him Emily hadn't seen in a while. One evening, Caroline pulled out her phone and started showing old family photos. Everyone gathered around. Emily joined them late, drying her hands from dish duty. "Oh wow, this one," Caroline laughed, showing a beach photo. Jason had his arm around Caroline, both smiling. Margaret zoomed in. "That was such a good trip." "Was that the year Jason and I got married?" Emily asked. They all glanced at each other. No one answered. The next photo slid in. Later that night, as Emily was organizing drawers in the guest room, Caroline's new temporary domain, she accidentally knocked over a small stack of papers from Caroline's open suitcase. She bent to pick them up. At the bottom was a photo. Her wedding photo. Jason in a tuxedo, Emily beside him in ivory. Margaret, Richard, and Caroline flanking them. But something was wrong. Emily looked closer. Her face had been scratched out. The gouges were deliberate, not an accident. Not a fold. Not time. Rage didn't hit. Nor did sadness. What came instead was the cold certainty of something she had been denying for too long. She was not a welcome guest here. She was the stain they wanted to erase. Sometimes betrayal isn't a scream, it's what no one says out loud. Emily held the wedding photo in her hands long after she found it. She turned it over. Blank. No note. No explanation. She placed it back exactly where she found it in Caroline's suitcase, careful not to disturb anything else. Her hands were shaking, but her voice wasn't, not when she walked into their bedroom an hour later, photo still vivid in her mind. "Jason," she said quietly, "we need to talk." He looked up from his phone, surprised. "What's wrong?" "It's Caroline," she began, folding her arms. I don't know. Cruel, in these small ways. Undermining me. Ignoring me in front of your parents. You don't see it?" Jason frowned. "Caroline? Come on, Em. She just got here. You might be overthinking." Emily's mouth went dry. "You think I imagined her calling my muffins cute? Talking over me? That I imagined her scratching my face out of our wedding photo?" Jason blinked. "What photo?" "I found it. In her suitcase. My face was," she inhaled, slow and hard, "ripped out." "You think that's normal?" He rubbed his forehead, frustrated. "She probably didn't do it on purpose. Maybe it got damaged. It was deliberate." Jason stood, avoiding her eyes. "I think maybe you're reading into things too much. Caroline's intense, sure, but she's family." The word slammed into her. "And what am I?" She didn't say it. She couldn't. Because deep down, she already knew the answer. Jason's loyalty was to comfort, not to her. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing. Her loyalty had become her own prison. Every time she tried to stand up, she was told to sit back down, nicely. Every time she spoke up, her voice echoed back unheard. She wasn't paranoid. She was just alone. Later that night, the family gathered in the living room. Margaret served tea. Richard chuckled at one of Caroline's stories about a lawyer who cried in court. Jason smiled. Emily sat quietly in the corner. Caroline rose, passing behind her, casually brushing Emily's shoulder as she leaned in close. A whisper, soft enough for no one else to hear, "This was never supposed to be your life." Emily froze. Caroline straightened, walked away, and took her seat beside Jason, like nothing had happened. "She brings a pie. She brings a plan." The next morning, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and victory. Caroline stood by the oven, removing a homemade pie with a flourish. "Apple cherry with a splash of bourbon," she announced. Margaret clapped. "Oh, that's my favorite." Richard beamed. "You always had the magic touch." Emily stood at the sink, watching the celebration from the sidelines. No one noticed she had already made breakfast. Her quiche sat untouched. "I thought I'd surprise everyone," Caroline said, sliding the pie onto the counter. "Emily looked so tired this morning, I figured she'd be grateful." The comment lingered like smoke. Jason laughed, not because it was funny, but because he didn't want it to be uncomfortable. Emily said nothing. That day, Caroline whispered. In corners. On couches. In passing. Harmless little stories. Emily gets anxious. Emily forgets things. Emily might be struggling emotionally. The words were shaped like concern but carried a blade beneath them. By evening, Margaret asked, "Have you been sleeping okay, dear?" Emily turned. "Fine." "Why?" "Just, you seem a little off lately." Jason looked up from his laptop. "She's just been stressed." Emily stared at him. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay beside Jason, eyes open in the dark, replaying every conversation she hadn't been part of. Every time her name was said without her being in the room, she knew what was happening. She was being quietly erased, made to seem unstable, fragile, unfit. Caroline was building a case, and everyone was too comfortable to question it. The next morning, Emily found her mother-in-law in the kitchen, whispering to Richard. "We have to talk to Jason before she traps him forever." Emily didn't move. She stood hidden just around the corner, heart pounding. Trap him? Her? She waited for Richard to push back. He didn't. He simply sighed and said, "We should have never let it get this far." Emily turned and walked away before they could see her. Tears came fast, not from hurt, but from the terrifying clarity. She wasn't part of this family. She was a threat to it. She planned the party. Caroline took the spotlight. Emily planned every detail. The guest list, the string lights, the curated playlist from Caroline's teenage years. She even ordered the same lemon buttercream cake Caroline used to request on her birthdays, remembered only by Emily, not Caroline. Jason helped set the table, half present. "She's going to love this," he said distractedly, checking his phone. Emily smiled anyway. She always smiled. It was safer that way. When Caroline walked in and saw the decorations, the catered finger food, the sparkling cider chilled just right, she paused. "Oh. Wow," she said. "This is so thoughtful." Emily stepped forward. "I wanted to." Caroline cut her off, throwing her arms around Margaret. "Mom, this is amazing. You remembered the cake." Margaret beamed. "Of course I did, honey." Jason handed Caroline a glass. "We all wanted to make it special." Emily froze in the doorway of her own effort. The guests arrived, old friends, family friends, former neighbors. Caroline floated from conversation to conversation like the host of her own private gala. Jason stuck close to her side, laughing at stories Emily had never heard. She kept to the kitchen most of the night. Refilling plates. Replacing napkins. No one noticed. Until she heard someone say, "Caroline really knows how to throw a party." Emily blinked. She hadn't corrected them. What would be the point? Later that night, as she cleaned up after everyone had gone to bed, she noticed something odd in the guest room. Caroline's suitcase was half open again. Emily didn't mean to look, she told herself that. But the papers were just there, slipped out, like they wanted to be found. Real estate documents. A property Jason had been casually talking about touring last month. Emily scanned the paperwork. It was in Jason's name. Signed by Caroline. Co-signed. Her name, Emily's, wasn't anywhere. Her stomach turned. They were making decisions. Quietly. Together. Legally. She thought of Caroline's whispered comment, "This was never supposed to be your life." And now, she was starting to understand. This wasn't sabotage. This was erasure. Caroline is secretly pushing Jason to buy a home and put it in the family trust, without Emily. The next day, Emily sat in the backyard alone, the real estate papers clutched in her lap. The garden Jason's mother loved was blooming. Tulips in neat rows, azaleas bursting pink. Everything alive, except her place here. She knew she had to ask him. Not accuse. Ask. That night, while Caroline was upstairs on a FaceTime call and his parents were watching an old western, Emily sat across from Jason at the dining table. "Did you look at a property recently?" she asked softly. Jason frowned. "Yeah, a condo. Just to get an idea of the market." "With Caroline?" He shrugged. "She knows the area." It wasn't serious. Emily slid the paper across the table. Jason stared at it for a long time, then looked up, annoyed. "Why were you going through her stuff?" "She left it out." Jason didn't deny the documents. "What is this, Jason?" she asked. "Why is Caroline signing with you? Why am I not even in the conversation?" He exhaled. "You're making this a thing when it's not. She just has better credit, okay? And Dad thinks it's smarter to keep it in the family name. Legally, it's for security." "For whose security?" Emily's voice rose. "Because it looks like everyone's securing a future without me." Jason stood, pacing. "It's not like that. You always assume the worst about my family." "No, Jason," she said, standing too. "I assume what they show me." The silence between them pulsed like a bruise. Later that night, Emily stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and watched light flicker under Caroline's door. She walked closer, slowly, and heard the soft buzz of another FaceTime. Caroline's voice, low and intimate. "No. He's not happy. He just won't admit it. He still talks about you. I can feel it." Pause. A woman's voice replied, too faint to make out. "Caroline again, he misses you." Emily backed away, every step heavier than the last. She didn't know what hurt more, that Caroline was manipulating him. Or that Jason might be listening. He holds her hand. But his heart stays elsewhere. Emily didn't sleep. The house creaked and whispered in the dark, but Jason lay beside her like stone, peaceful, unaware, maybe uncaring. In the morning, she stood by the coffee machine as he walked in, yawning. "I heard Caroline last night," she said quietly. Jason rubbed his face. "Okay. She was FaceTiming someone." "Your ex." He stiffened. "You sure about that?" "I heard her say, he misses you. He just won't admit it. She's trying to bring her back." "Jason, she's sabotaging us." Jason stared at her for a moment, then looked away. "That's insane. She's manipulating everything." He grabbed a mug. "She's not. You're just, Emily, you keep making her the villain in everything. I think you're spiraling." Emily blinked, stunned. "I'm spiraling?" He didn't answer. He sipped his coffee and walked past her. It was like being dismissed without a word. All day, Jason stayed silent. His parents talked around Emily. Caroline smiled like nothing was wrong. The family machine rolled on, and she was the loose gear they wished they could replace. That night, Jason sat beside her on the bed and took her hand. She didn't expect it. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know things have been tense. I don't want us fighting." She looked at their hands. He was warm, soft, familiar. But she couldn't feel safe. "You still love me?" she asked. His smile was small, tired. "Of course." But he didn't say her name, he didn't pull her in. He didn't fight for her. She nodded and turned off the light. It felt like turning off a small part of herself. The next morning, her body felt off, slightly dizzy, more tender than usual. She pulled a box from under the bathroom sink, hands trembling. A pregnancy test. She waited. The pink lines appeared slowly, like they were making a decision of their own. 2 lines. Positive. She sat down hard on the edge of the bathtub, the stick still in her hand. She stared at her reflection. She had never felt more alone, or more certain. This baby would be loved, even if no one else in that house knew how to love her. She wanted love. She found secrets. The attic smelled of dust and old promises. Emily hadn't been up there since they moved in. No one had. Margaret claimed it was just for boxes, but something about its silence called to her now. She needed distance. Answers. A place that didn't whisper "you don't belong here" every time she breathed. She found the journals tucked in a crate marked "Caroline, college stuff." Old spiral-bound notebooks, faded ink, pages bloated with emotion. At first, she skimmed. Then she read. Caroline at 17, feeling abandoned. Jason, the younger brother, suddenly drifting toward strangers. Caroline at 20, writing that Emily took him without earning him. She doesn't understand our bond, one page read. She doesn't belong in our story. Emily sat cross-legged on the cold floor, heart pounding. Page after page, Caroline poured out her envy, masked as protectiveness. Her obsession with Jason wasn't romantic. It was about control. Legacy. Possession. Caroline needed to be the center. And she would destroy anyone who pulled the family's love away from her. Emily's hands trembled as she turned the last page. Her eyes burned with a strange clarity. This wasn't about her muffins or her voice or her hair or her smile. It was about Caroline's fear, that Emily had a kind of love she couldn't fake or force. And Jason, he had allowed it. That evening, Emily laid the journals out on the dining table after dinner. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't flinch. I think it's time everyone reads what Caroline really thinks. The silence was louder than shouting. Jason picked up one notebook. His face fell as he read. Richard's eyes narrowed. Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the next one. Caroline stood at the doorway, frozen. You invaded my privacy, she snapped. You invaded my marriage, Emily replied. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard stood. His voice, always controlled, was suddenly sharp. Emily. Enough. He stepped forward, hand raised, not quite a slap, not quite a threat, but something ugly between. Jason grabbed his arm. Don't. The air turned glass sharp. Emily didn't flinch. She simply said, you all let her ruin this family. You just didn't want to see it. Emily leaves the house. No yelling. Just a small suitcase. She finds a room at a friend's and begins therapy. She didn't pack much. A few clothes. The ultrasound photo. One book. Her toothbrush. She zipped the suitcase slowly, the sound somehow louder than the voices in the next room. No one tried to stop her. No one noticed, really. Jason sat outside with his head in his hands. Margaret paced the kitchen. Caroline locked herself in the guest room. Emily stood in the doorway of the home she had tried to make hers. No tears. No grand goodbye. Just a soft breath and a gentle closing of the door behind her. She didn't call Jason. She didn't leave a note. She called Madison, an old friend from her teaching days, someone she hadn't leaned on in years but who had always said, if you ever need space, my couch is yours. Madison didn't ask questions. Just sent the address and a heart emoji. By nightfall, Emily had a roof over her head, a blanket wrapped around her, and a body that no longer felt like it was bracing for impact. The silence was clean. Not empty, clean. The next morning, she made her own coffee, slowly. And she scheduled her first therapy session in years. It wasn't just to process Jason, or the family, or the pregnancy. It was to understand why she had kept quiet for so long. Why she had given so much to people who gave so little in return. Week 1, she cried. Week 2, she admitted she had stopped recognizing her own voice. Week 3, she stopped apologizing every time she spoke. By week 4, she smiled for no reason in the middle of a grocery store aisle. One morning, as she was organizing lesson plans on her laptop, her name was called over the school intercom. "There's someone here for you in the front office." She stood, confused. She hadn't told anyone where she was, not even Jason. When she rounded the corner, her heart stuttered. Jason. Standing at the reception desk. Holding flowers. But not smiling. Just watching her. Like someone who had finally seen something, too late. He says he's sorry. She's no longer sure that's enough. Jason stood in the school office like someone who didn't know how to ask for forgiveness. Emily approached slowly, conscious of every eye behind the front desk glass. "I wasn't expecting you," she said. "I didn't know where else to go." She nodded once. "You found me." They sat on a bench just outside, under a maple tree starting to turn gold. Jason handed her the flowers. She took them, out of habit more than hope. "I read everything," he began. "All of Caroline's journals. I didn't know how deep it ran." Emily looked away. "She told you. You just didn't listen." "I was afraid of disrupting the family," he admitted. "Afraid of being the bad son." She turned to him, her voice quiet but sharp. "So you let me be the disruption instead." Jason closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emily nodded, but her face didn't soften. "I believe you," she said. "But I don't know if I trust you. There's a difference. I want to be better. For you. For the baby." Emily looked down at her hands, then at the flowers resting on the bench between them. "I'm going to raise this child," she said carefully. "But I'm not raising it in that house. Not near that history. Not under that roof." Jason looked at her like he had just realized she wasn't pleading anymore. She wasn't hoping. She was deciding. "I get it," he said. "I just want to be part of it. Whatever that means." Emily stood slowly. "That's not a promise I can make today." Jason didn't ask her to. He just watched her walk back into the school, a woman no longer asking for space. Just taking it. Caroline's ex-husband messages her. He was emotionally destroyed by her too. Emily posted the excerpt late one night. A paragraph from Caroline's journal, anonymized. Just a few lines. Words that had once made her feel small and erased, now serving as a signal. She posted it in a private online support group for women navigating difficult in-law relationships. She didn't expect much. By morning, she had 147 comments. Stories, questions, parallels. A chorus of women who had been scapegoated, erased, silenced. One comment stood out. "This reminds me so much of my ex-wife. The way she tried to isolate me from my sister. The way she spoke about people when she thought no one was listening." Her name was Caroline too. Emily froze. She clicked the profile. A man. 40-something. Divorced. East Coast. She messaged him, "Was your Caroline from New Jersey?" He replied in 5 minutes, "Yes. Caroline Mercer." "Why?" Emily's hand shook. "She's my sister-in-law," she typed. "And she tried to destroy my marriage." The typing bubble appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. "She destroyed mine." They talked for hours, not about revenge, but recovery. He told her about how Caroline had isolated him from friends. How she spun narratives so subtly, even he started to believe them. How she turned love into performance. Emily listened. Cried. Then exhaled in a way she hadn't in months. Someone saw it too. Someone survived it. They agreed to meet, neutral ground, a quiet cafe near her school. But when she arrived, someone else was already sitting at the table. Jason. He stood when he saw her, not angry, just quietly broken. I saw the messages, he said. He messaged me too. Emily blinked. You read them? Jason nodded. All of them. She looked at him, the boy she'd loved, the man she'd feared, and now, the father of her child. And for the first time, she didn't know which version of him she was speaking to. He finally sees the woman he married, and the sister he never really knew. The three of them sat in silence for a long time. Caroline's ex-husband, Mark, broke it first. She weaponizes affection, he said. At first, it feels like loyalty. Then it becomes a leash. Jason listened without interrupting. Mark spoke of love turned strategic. Arguments where he was always the villain. Apologies that came wrapped in guilt. The way Caroline rewrote history in real time. How, by the end, he couldn't tell if he was the problem, or the prisoner. Jason looked at Emily. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her silence told him more than words ever could. She needs control, Mark said. Not love. Control. Jason lowered his gaze, his voice ragged. I thought I was protecting the family. I was just protecting her lies. He looked at Emily again, not with pride or shame, but with clarity. I let you drown, he said. Because I didn't want to admit the water was poisoned. Emily blinked, her throat tightening. Jason turned to Mark. Thank you. For helping me see it. Mark nodded, then quietly excused himself. Jason and Emily were left alone. I can't fix everything, Jason said. But I can start with this, I already spoke to my parents. Emily waited. I told them I'm done pretending. That I won't let Caroline near our child unless she gets real help. That I'm stepping back from the family trust, from their expectations. From the version of me they want. He swallowed. I told them it's you and our baby, or nothing. Emily's breath caught. For the first time, his words didn't sound like damage control. They sounded like truth. Still, she was cautious. Wounded animals bite even when rescued. And what if I don't want to go back, she asked. Jason shook his head. I'm not asking you to. I'll go wherever you are. There was a silence between them, heavy but clean. Not everything was healed. But something new had begun. The home she once served now calls her back, but on her terms. It arrived on plain ivory cardstock, no flourishes, no warmth. Just ink and formality. Emily, we would like to invite you for dinner. No expectations. Just one evening. Margaret and Richard. No dear. No, we miss you. Just a test. One last grasp at the illusion of control. Emily held the card in one hand, her other resting on her pregnant belly. I'm not going for them, she told Jason. I know, he said. You're going for you. They drove in silence. The house looked identical, but her body reacted before her mind did. Her chest tightened as they pulled into the driveway. Her palms dampened. Jason placed a hand over hers gently. If you want to turn around, I'll drive. She didn't. The front door opened before they knocked. Margaret stood there in pearls and her best cardigan. Her smile was tight. Practiced. Emily, she said like she was tasting the word. You look, well. Richard appeared behind her. Good to see you. No mention of the baby. Not yet. Emily stepped in. The air was just as she remembered, lemon polish, starch, and secrets. The walls still held the same family portraits, none of which included her. The dining table was set with care. Silverware polished. Centerpiece fresh. An empty seat awaited her like a dare. Caroline was gone, a non-negotiable Jason had insisted on. Margaret had agreed with hesitation, but her eyes said, this isn't permanent. Dinner began with awkward pleasantries. How's your job? Richard asked without looking up from his plate. Good, Emily replied flatly, Jason tried to bridge the space. We've been going to prenatal classes. Margaret nodded politely. That's wise. Silence returned like a fog. Every clink of cutlery echoed too loud. Then came the shift. Margaret cleared her throat. I've been reading some things. About boundary work. Emotional triangulation. Emily blinked. I think I failed you, Margaret said, not quite meeting her eyes. As a mother-in-law. As a woman. It should have meant something. But it felt careful. Measured, as if rehearsed. Emily looked at her. You knew what she was doing. You let her. Margaret's lip trembled slightly. I didn't want to lose my children. You almost lost your grandchild instead. Richard inhaled like he was about to object, but Jason cut in firmly, let her speak. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. You built a home where silence was easier than truth. And then you watched me unravel in it. Margaret blinked fast. I thought you were strong enough to handle it. I was, Emily said. But that doesn't make what you did any less cruel. No one spoke after that. They finished eating in silence. When it was time to leave, Margaret walked them to the door. Her hand reached out, not to hug, but to touch Emily's shoulder. You've changed, she said quietly. Emily turned the knob. I've remembered who I was. She stepped outside. The scent of the house, lemon, starch, polished wood, clung to her briefly. But only briefly. It would not follow her. Emily doesn't stay. She walks through the house, receives apologies, acknowledges her pain, then leaves to start her new life. Jason chooses to follow her, not out of guilt, but because he finally learned how to love her right. The second time she walked into the house, she wasn't afraid of being judged. She knew she would be. Jason stood beside her, hands loose by his side. Not holding hers. Not leading her in. Just standing there, steady, waiting for her to move when she was ready. She did. Margaret greeted them with a fragile smile. Richard stayed in his seat, flipping a newspaper he wasn't reading. Caroline, as promised, wasn't there. Her absence hung heavier than her presence ever did. This time, there was no dinner. No performance, just quiet. I wanted to say something, Margaret said suddenly. Before the baby comes. Emily stood still. Margaret's voice cracked. I treated you like a guest. Like you had to prove you belonged. And when you stopped trying, I punished you for that too. Richard shifted. Cleared his throat. What she means is, we see it now. The damage. Emily didn't nod. She didn't soften. She just listened. Jason stepped forward, but she held up a hand. No, she said. Let me. She looked around the room, this museum of old control, polished silence, and years of emotional dust. This house broke something in me, she said. And I let it. I let all of you shrink me down to what you were comfortable with. Jason tensed, but said nothing. You don't get to apologize for that and expect closeness again. You get to apologize and live with the distance you created. Margaret's eyes glistened. I understand. Emily nodded once. Good. She turned toward Jason. He held her gaze, not with expectation, but with something steadier. Something earned. I'm not staying, she told him. I'll keep the peace. I'll teach our child what grace looks like. But I won't live here. I won't raise them in shadows. Jason stepped closer. I know. I'm not asking you to. She studied him for a beat longer. Then what are you asking? Just, to be there. Wherever you are. Not as a partner in guilt, but as someone who finally learned to listen. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't promising miracles. He was offering presence. And for the first time it felt real. She walked through the house one last time. Paused in the kitchen. Touched the corner of the dining table where she used to place the napkins just right. She smiled, not because it felt good, but because it no longer held power over her. She walked to the door. Jason followed. Quietly. Margaret stayed seated. Richard stood, but didn't speak. Emily opened the door and stepped into the afternoon light. The world outside was loud and uncertain. But it was hers. Jason joined her on the porch. He didn't ask where they were going. He simply waited. She turned to him. "This is the last time I walk out of that house feeling smaller than I am." He nodded. "And the first time I walk with you instead of ahead of you." She exhaled, long, slow, free. They stepped off the porch together.